It is now my distinct delight and pleasure to introduce to you the 2024 awardee for the SNMMI Therapy Center of Excellence Saul Hertz lecture. The Saul Hertz Award was established in 2016, soon after the launch of the SNMMI Therapy Center of Excellence that happened actually during my presidency of the society in 2015-16. This is a Lifetime Achievement Award in the honor of professional achievements of Dr. Hertz as the pioneer of radioiodine therapy. And you can see the prior awardees from 2016 to last year, and they're all luminaries in the field of radionuclide or radiopharmaceutical therapy. And you may note that since 2022, this is the third Aussie in a row. Yeah. All right, so it is my pleasure to tell you that Michael S. Hofman is the awardee for this year. He's a senior medical staff and director of the Prostate Theranostics and Imaging Center of Excellence at Peter Mac Cancer Center, and also a clinical professor of medicine at the University of Melbourne. And when I looked at that picture, if you ever want a job in Hollywood, you can come, I can give you an address. So Mike Hofman received his MBBS degree with honors from Monash University in Victoria, Australia in 1998. He's a fellow of the Royal Australian College of Physicians and completed a research fellowship at Guy's and St. Thomas's, London, UK. He's a PET-CT head and also the co-chair of the Cancer Imaging Research Committee. He's also a committee member of the Peter Mac Research Leadership Group and member of several international committees, including Lancet Commission on Prostate Cancer and others. He has numerous Australian and international awards. His research funding is around $35 million as a chief investigator since 2012. And he's also an associate editor with major journals, as you can see there. He's a grant reviewer for a number of funding agencies and has been a keynote speaker at many major meetings, including oncology and radiation oncology and others. He has also received teaching awards and mentorship awards. This shows Professor Hofman's publication track record, which is wonderful. You can see that he has more than 18,500 citations, 84% of them over the last 5 years, with greater than 280 publications. Dr. Hofman led the seminal Pro-SMA study, which was a 10-site randomized trial of PSMA PET for staging high-risk prostate cancer. He currently co-leads the primary 2 study, a 660-patient randomized controlled trial evaluating the PSMA PET-CT in patients with equivocal MRI for improved diagnosis of prostate cancer. He also led the therapy study, a multi-center randomized trial of lutetium-177 PSMA versus cabazitaxel chemotherapy. Currently, he is leading or co-leading more than 10 investigator trials, including combination therapies and earlier use of Lu-PSMA, as well as the first in-human trial of the terbium-161 PSMA. These are some of the major publications that he has had over the years with awards. I'm just going to show you some of this. This was in JNM in 2015. And other articles in radiographics that everybody refers to still. And this was the Image of the Year award in 2018 from his lab. And these are the pro-PSMA and the therapy trials that I just spoke about, published in major journal Lancet. And these are some of the media that he has received. This is in Australian Financial Review. Wow, another great picture. And some of the pictures, here's a picture with Barbara Hertz and at the 2016 Theranostics World Congress, and more recently at the PROS TIC 2024 preceptorship in Melbourne with 362 delegates from 26 countries. So with that, it's again my honor to present to you Dr. Mike Hofman. We're going to take a picture before your lecture. There's a photographer here, and I give you your plaque, and then you can give your lecture. Thanks again.
Thank you so much for that very kind introduction. I don't know where you got those photos from. You have some secret sources. It's a real pleasure to give this lecture today and a real honour to receive this award. When I'm not taking photos with a PET or a SPECT scanner, I actually like doing a bit of landscape photography in wild places. That's my thing. And I'm pleased to share some of them throughout my talk. This one actually doesn't project too well. We need the lights out like a dark radiology room. This is taken a few weeks ago on a camping trip. And actually I learnt on this camping trip what I already knew, that theranostics has gone mainstream. We were camping really in the middle of nowhere, like an overnight walk to get there. That's my son. You can see my wife in the distance there. And the people camping right next to us, they were in their mid-20s, young, energetic, and they asked what we do, and you have to explain what a nuclear medicine physician is. It's a bit awkward. What does that mean? And as soon as I said I'm a nuclear medicine physician, the girl said to me, "Do you do theranostics?" And I was like... And she'd done a Bachelor of Science in Queensland, actually, and she had been experienced small animal PET and SPECT and was really into it, knew everything about theranostics. And I think this industrialisation or commercialisation that we've seen with PSMA in the last few years really does mean that so many different people from different craft groups now know about theranostics, including our medical students. So times have really changed. This is a picture from the 2016 Theranostics World Congress in Melbourne, where Barbara put up a large display. I first met Barbara probably about 12 years ago at an SNMMI meeting, and she would come every year and put these educational exhibits on, and truly educational. And about 2 years ago, at the Japanese World Federation meeting, she handed me this gift, carefully wrapped, and said, "Take it back to your room and take it home, look after it with care." I had no idea what it was. When I opened it, I was quite amazed and emotional to find that it was Saul Hertz's original gold pen. It should be in a museum somewhere. I haven't yet found the right place to keep it, but I still keep it carefully wrapped in the tissue that you brought it in. But I did bring it today. It's in my pocket here. So this is helping guide through my talk. There's a few trainees in the audience or people that I work with that I'm pleased to see, and they'll know that the very first question I ask a trainee when they come into nuclear medicine at Peter Mac, I say, "What's the best radiotracer?" And they usually say FDG, or then they say PSMA because they know I'm a PSMA person, and I go, no, it's radioactive iodine, and it truly is. It's got the highest tumour to background contrast of any tracer. Saul Hertz was unable to image this on a PET or a SPECT camera, so he couldn't see these incredible SUVs. But with I-124, which is what we use at Peter Mac now to do all our radioiodine imaging, we see just extraordinary uptake. SUV 430 in this node that measures 1 millimetre, and we have no other tracer that comes close. And so when he said that his research projects in cancer of the thyroid, he believed that it holds the key to the larger problem of cancer in general. You know, I think in this decade, this is coming true. Here's a patient we treated at Peter Mac with metastases to the bone, SUV of 980 in this bone metastasis. So it's not surprising that with a single dose of radioactive iodine, the lesional dosimetry is enough to cure this patient. And you can see the ideal properties of a therapy radiotracer on this slide, which is high tumour uptake and almost no background uptake. With an SUV scale of 0 to 25, you can't see any background activity. In fact, the scan on the right, that's normal. If I don't put the blue contour around it based on the CT, you can't even see that there's a scan there. So at the EANM meeting last year, I was asked to give a plenary talk, which was a really great honour. And I made this slide, which is subsequently in an editorial in J&M. And Johannes Chernin, I don't know if he's here, asked me to... I think he actually came up with the title, which was Hofman's Hierarchy of Theranostics for me. And here we see kind of SUVs in a log scale on the y-axis. And radioiodine just blows everything else out of the water, with SUVs typically over 100 and even up to several thousands. PSMA and dotatate are pretty good, but other radiotracers really fail in comparison. And the blue, which are traces with low SUVs, these are not going to be game-changing. And one of the messages of today's talks is that there are too many of these currently being explored. There's lots of phase 2, even phase 3 trials being done with traces in blue. They're very unlikely to really ever help our patients. PSMA and dotatate are real game changers, but we still can't beat 80-year-old radioactive iodine. And despite some of the irrational exuberance that's happening at the moment with the traces in blue, there's still a lot of hope, because surely we can do better than 80-year-old radioiodine, and we should be able to find new traces with SUVs literally in the thousands, which would offer the opportunity to cure patients, which I think is the goal, like with radioactive iodine, to really cure patients with metastatic disease rather than just aiming for palliation. So in the rest of my talk, I want to share a little bit of my history, and the main goal is actually for the younger people in the audience to hopefully help them pursue a meaningful career in nuclear medicine. And I'm going to cover some of the questions that younger people sort of come up to me and often ask me. And one of the questions people ask me is, how did you learn to speak in front of a large audience, and who does your slides? I'm pleased to say I put together the slides myself. PowerPoint's really wonderful. But I also want to tell you I'm not a natural speaker. In fact, when I first started giving talks, like many, I used to write every single word of the talk out and then literally read the talk out. And much like reporting PET scans or cardiac scans, after you do that over and over again, you get good at it, and after a while you no longer need any notes. So I've had the pleasure of speaking in front of some very large audiences, even empty halls like this. But I'm really standing on the shoulders of giants, and before we saw the previous Saul Hertz SNMMI award winners. And I'd really like to thank Hossein. I think you were the key for me nominating me to this award. I can tell you I would have not gone down that track. There are many other people in the audience that are probably more worthy for this award. And I have a little bit of imposter syndrome because I'm a little bit younger than these previous award winners. But on the back of the S&M shirts, it says something like, get a half-life. And I kind of feel I'm probably halfway through my life. But Saul Hertz actually died at the age of 46. I think I have that right, from a heart attack. So when we think about him, what he achieved in 46 years old, it was quite amazing. Recently, together with Ben Greenspan and in the audience, we wrote this article for J&M, and it's quite incredible what was achieved in 46 years. So you can achieve a lot in a short period of time. And it all started when he asked this seminal question, could radioactive iodine be made artificially? It was a really simple question, and sometimes these amazing ideas come from just really simple ideas. I want to flash back to 2003. This is a photo I took on Machu Picchu. I'd actually just finished my internal medicine training. In Australia, we can either do internal medicine or radiology training as a pathway to nuclear medicine. It's the same today. And our trainees today are roughly 50-50, half from both backgrounds. And somehow I decided to do nuclear medicine. And I'd worked in a large tertiary hospital, and they did VQ scans. And when I walked down to get the VQ results, people were quite kind to me and explained to me, whereas radiology was always a bit, narky. It was difficult to get anything out of them. So I thought that looks like a good specialty to choose. I'd enrolled in a nuclear medicine training program whilst I was travelling for half a year, and I really didn't have much of an idea of what nuclear medicine would really offer at that time, and it's been a long and winding journey. My first year of training was all about nuclear cardiology. It was really endless cardiac stress tests, day after day. And I put my first abstract together that year and submitted it to EA&M 2005. And to my surprise, it was accepted as an oral abstract, subsequently published in a great journal, Nuclear Medicine Communications. And during that little year, I did a randomised trial where we gave patients either milk or water to minimise subdiaphragmatic artifacts for those people in the audience that still do cardiac stress tests. So I think I maybe was born to be a bit of a clinical trialist, but it was very easy to do this back in 20 years ago. The amount of paperwork to do a prospective randomised trial was quite easy. I pulled it out, and it was like a 20-page submission to ethics. It was quite small. The protocol was like 4 or 5 pages. Nowadays, the amount of paperwork and bureaucracy to get a trial like this done would be 5 to 10-fold, and it would be impossible really to do this within the year of being a registrar, although there's probably still opportunities in some other countries to do this in a faster way. You always remember your first supervisor. That was John Mackay. I don't think he's here, but there's many friends of him here. And he famously warned me, the problem with nuclear medicine, Michael, is that you're only going to use 5% of your brain. And that was in the days of planar imaging. There was no SPECT CT, there was no PET CT, and all day was VQ scans and nuclear cardiology. And to be honest, it was a little bit dull. But when I went to my first international meeting and presented that cardiac stress test project, I kind of discovered theranostics, this incredible presentation from Erasmus of lutetium dotatate. This is a photo I took from that conference. At that time, I hadn't even heard of lutetium 177, and there were already pictures, this is in 2005, of gallium dotatate PET CT that looked quite extraordinary. So I was very interested in PET CT, and I ventured off to London, where there was a fantastic academic centre doing a lot of lymphoma risk-adapted studies, and really a great team there that really inspired probably my academic career in nuclear medicine. A few years before I started nuclear medicine, PET CT made the front cover of the Time magazine as the medical invention of the year. And really I fell in love with PET CT, and that was a great passion for the rest of my nuclear medicine career. When I came back from London, I worked a little bit in private, a little bit in public, not in an academic centre, and I was really missing that academia. And there was a strong academic centre in Australia at the time, led by Rod, who's a self-declared PET guru, and I gravitated towards there. And, it was a difficult decision because I needed to take a little bit of a pay cut to move from my private world to this large academic centre. And I tried to negotiate a part-time job with Rod. I said, I'll stay in my private job 1 or 2 days a week. I'll come to Peter Mac for 3 days a week. And he said, no, it's full-time or no time. And it was a good decision, because if you do want to delve into research, you really do need to commit. And if you're in different places every day or half-time, unfortunately, you're not likely to establish a strong research career. There's just not enough time. So you really do need to commit. This is a paper from 2001 of the first description of gallium dotatate PET CT in humans, comparing it to indium octreoscan. And it's a great paper because the first author is M. Hofman. It's not me. This is someone from Hanover in Germany, but I sometimes get confused with this M. Hofman, which is fantastic. So it's my namesake. And we really repeated his work at Peter Mac. One of the reasons I went to Peter Mac is it was the only centre in Australia with a gallium-68 generator that was capable of doing these gallium dotatate PET scans. And that was actually the case for the first 3 or 4 years where I was at Peter Mac. There wasn't a single other gallium generator in Australia. And my very first paper out of Peter Mac was focused on the management impact of gallium dotatate. And we showed that it had a high management impact, that it could replace indium octreoscan, and we used this paper to try to get funding of gallium dotatate in Australia. But it wasn't an easy journey. Actually, when you don't have a track record, it can be harder to get things published. It was actually rejected by EJNM and JNM, and it got stuck in peer review for about 5 months. It took over a year to get this paper published in our local journal, Journal of Medical Imaging and Radiation Oncology. And I'm pleased that it's got over 270 citations. So it doesn't really matter where you publish stuff now. People find it on PubMed. And this paper is also cited in several international guidelines, and it contributed to funding in Australia in 2018. So when we started this work in 2010, there was one place in Australia where you could get a gallium dotatate PET scan. And today, only a decade and a half later, there are 116 PET centres in Australia, and pretty much every PET centre in Australia now offers gallium dotatate PET scan. So it's been an incredible transition to see this change where it was very difficult to get a gallium dotatate PET to now where this is funded and it's a standard of care and you can get this very quickly. This is a photo I took in Antarctica about a year and a half ago. These are some penguins on an iceberg, and they're quite hungry. They look very cute, but they're really, really hungry. Here's a cute seal. It looks not very dangerous at all, but let me tell you, he's quite vicious. And the penguins are quite nervous. They need to jump into the water to get their food, but it's quite dangerous. And it takes one penguin to really be the leader and take the dive and jump in. And then everybody else follows. And research is a little bit like this, actually. So this is the first VQ scan from Henry Wagner, published in JAMA in 1964. And what a crazy idea to sort of inhale radioactivity and do a scan. Like, if you tried to put that to an ethics committee nowadays, I think you would be knocked back pretty quickly. And this was, done on healthy volunteers, maybe even themselves first. It's really been an interesting pathway from there. And much of my earlier research at Peter Mac was focused on gallium-68 and how we could take what we were doing on conventional planar nuclear medicine or SPECT-CT and do it on PET-CT scanners. And together with Rod, we published a lot of papers on this topic. And it's also 60 years since the first description of the gallium generator, which was titled a gallium positron cow for medical use, where I think this concept of milking a generator comes from. And it's by Hal Anger, who went on to really create the SPECT camera and put gallium-68 out of business. So things kind of go full circle. Everyone lost interest in gallium-68, and then it's been reinvigorated in the last 20 years. So early on in 1966, there's a series of over 200 patients using gallium EDTA for imaging brain tumours. And they noted at the time that gallium-68 had low radiation hazard, it was easy to prepare, it had constant availability, and it was of low cost. This was in the 60s. And we thought, well, we're going to try to recreate things. So we did gallium VQ imaging by inhaling Galli gas on a Technigas generator and using gallium MAA. This is where my research career started to take off because it made the front cover of the J&M. It also made the front cover of this respiratory journal, which is actually the highest impact respiratory journal. This was a moving image done together with Jason Callahan, who I can see in the audience, the tech master behind this, and our medical physicists were really engaged as well. So this work made the front cover of actually 3 different journals of different craft groups. And I don't think many people are aware of this, but we've done a whole portfolio of work with PET-VQ. This is more than 25 manuscripts. So I think this is a whole area that awaits further exploration, particularly in the era of total body PETs, where you can get all the lungs in one single field of view. You can see the first authors here are a range of people from different disciplines: radiation oncology, nuclear medicine, medical physics, respiratory medicine, cardiothoracic surgeons, and even haematology centred around PE. This is Pierre Yves, who I think might be here somewhere, who came to Peter Mac for a year and did a lot of work and translated his expertise in VQ PET-CT across to PET-CT and has now taken this back to his centre in France. And we really get extraordinary pictures when we do VQ PET-CTs. This is a radiation treatment field, and you can see how it correlates so nicely with the damage done to lungs. We did some nice work comparing regional lung quantification to pulmonary function tests. And beyond PET-VQ, We explored other isotopes like gallium EDTA for kidney imaging. This is a Lasix challenge study, but done on a PET camera rather than a SPECT camera. And it's so nice when you can fuse the CT to it and you just get three-dimensional images that you can scroll through in a dynamic fashion. We labelled red blood cells with gallium-68, and we even did some gallium nanocolloid lymphoscintigraphy. And this is a striking image because it was some of my earliest research in prostate cancer. This was together with our radiation oncology colleagues that were inserting gold seeds for external beam radiation tracking. And we thought, well, let's inject some gallium nanocolloid at the same time. And we did whole body PET CT images. And what you can see is drainage from the prostate to a supraclavicular or mediastinal node, which was quite interesting and incredible. And then when PSMA PET CT came along a few years later, we can see that this is quite a typical pattern of spread, that you do see supradiaphragmatic nodes, and this is much like an anal or a rectal cancer. So we can do a lot of stuff with gallium-68 with PET CT. This is a photo I took a few weeks ago. There was a super huge aurora, which was a bit of a global phenomenon. This is about a 90-minute drive from Melbourne. And when I tweeted this image, a haematologist replied with the two words, SUV max 20. And I replied, no, this is more like SUV max 500. But it's the same colour scale. It's the rainbow colour scale that we use for PET CT imaging. It's got the red and the green. Apologies to anyone who's colourblind in the audience. But I wasn't satisfied with this image. I wanted something that was more, we like dynamic acquisitions. Fortunately, I did capture a total body PET dynamic version of this. I think we would need to dim the lights to see it properly. And some of the work that we were really trying to visualise early in the theranostics program was tumour heterogeneity. And what we did a lot of at Peter Mac was adding FDG in addition to the gallium dotatate. And we got a lot of striking pictures, like this patient who's got a pancreatic tail insulinoma, but only part of the insulinoma has dotatate expression in the centre. Much of it is FDG positive, and in these liver metastases, we see some that are PSMA positive, GATate positive, FDG negative, and vice versa. It's all a bit of a mixture. And if you biopsy two sites, one site will give you a well-differentiated tumour, and the other site will give you a aggressive, poorly differentiated tumour. And it was clear from these images that histopathology from a single site, guided by anatomic imaging, cannot give you the true picture of what's happening in any individual patient. And even when we consider advanced technologies like gene expression profiling or next-generation sequencing, if you're just going to biopsy a random site, you're not likely to find out what's really happening in that individual patient. And we developed this kind of approach of this flip-flop phenomenon between FDG and dotatate and between the grade 1 to grade 3, and how adding FDG to your dotatate can help best individualise and personalise your patient management. I think we've been doing lutetium dotatate at Peter Mac since 2005, so for almost 20 years. And this was really the inspiration for my early theranostics career. And these are just some incredible cases that I've pulled out from the library. The surgeons like to say that surgery is the only way you can cure cancer. And we do like to think that what we do is largely palliative, but we have had, with that large volume of experience, several people that have been cured. And this is a 16-year-old with a metastatic ACTH secreting neuroendocrine tumour who was literally in a third or fourth line treatment setting, had failed everolimus, other treatment options, and this patient was treated with PRRT as a last line therapy, and she had a complete response. And this slide's quite old. I think she's now up to almost 20 years follow-up and has not recurred, and had a normal FDG and dotatate PET scan kind of a year after treatment. A truly remarkable case. This is a case of a patient with a metastatic paraganglioma who presented with a massive neck mass. He looked quite dysmorphic. He'd had it for some time, and after treatment with lutetium dotatate had a truly amazing response. And it extends also to the paediatric population. I put this one in here for you, Helen. We need to have some paediatrics in the talk. This is a child with metastatic neuroblastoma who had progressed after multiple lines of therapy, including phase 1 trials with a hedgehog inhibitor. And actually, I remember I saw this child, and when he came, I wondered, what were we doing? Because he really looked very end-staged. He was very unwell. He had these huge tumour growths on his skull, and I wondered, are we causing more harm than good to give even more treatment to this, poor kid who's already had to endure so many lines of therapy. Yet he was treated with lutetium and temozolomide and had the most remarkable response, and actually returned to school. These masses disappeared. And I can tell you, I followed up his charts, and with long-term follow-up, he's been cured. Eventually, some of these neuroblastomas, they mature into a sort of non-malignant form as you go into adolescence, and he's had no recurrence of disease, which is quite extraordinary. So we do some amazing things with theranostics. It's not always cure, and sometimes we extend life by a short period of time, but it can still be very meaningful. This is a patient with metastatic cervical small cell carcinoma, a really rare type of tumour. She had failed all lines of therapy, including 3 lines of chemotherapy. This patient was dying with bedbound in hospital, really ECOG 3, 4. Creatinine was 800 due to bilateral ureteric obstruction from all this tumour mass. And one of their relatives had done a lot of research, was actually a doctor and somehow connected to the nuclear medicine department. And we did a dotatate PET scan, which showed quite good uptake. And we went on to treat this patient with 4 gigabecquerels of yttrium-90 dotatate together with some etoposide. And small cell cancer is often very responsive, and we had quite a miraculous response. And the patient's clinical condition improved rapidly, pain improved, renal function improved as the obstruction resolved, and the patient was able to leave hospital and attend an important family wedding a few weeks later. Almost certainly would have been dead without this treatment. And this response was very short-lived. Small cell tends to come back very aggressively, and it did, and we gave a few more cycles. And I think the patient only survived a few months, but it was a very meaningful few months because our treatments, they tend to be so well tolerated, so we don't cause much side effect. And if we can relieve the tumour-related symptoms, we can have some serious positive effects. Back in the neuroendocrine tumour world, I bumped into Josh Mailman. I don't know if he's here in the audience. Maybe not too many competing sessions, but he is here at the conference. And many patients have been an inspiration to me and the team at Peter Mac, and they're an important part of your research career. Many of the grants that I've won recently in sort of highly competitive processes have been in part because of the patients or consumer advocates that we engage in our research proposals. We take them to our interviews and they really help us. He is one of our patients from the SNMMI Image of the Year. Actually, this is one of the patients with prostate cancer. We celebrated his 80th birthday. We put a big party together. We have Annette in the audience. I think you probably organised it, our program manager. And it's quite special to celebrate special events with our patients as well. And you can see that not everyone could make it to this birthday party. Does anyone know who this is? Ah, you do. This is Amir. He had already left Peter Mac and went off to work initially with Richard Weil here in the US, and went on to be one of the SNMMI ones to watch, and recently got a Mars Shot Award. So we're very pleased to see people come through Peter Mac, and then we like them when they stay, but if they escape and do good things, that's great as well. So one of the challenges I faced in my theranostics career was this conundrum of really personalised and medicine, where we individualise the amount of lutetium we give to each patient, versus a more standardised and randomised approach. And I wrote about this in the neuroendocrine world. And the challenge here is that while personalised might be optimal, we really need high-level evidence and registration of these products first to get them available. And prospective data is really critical. And even a small study done really well may trigger acceptance by our clinical colleagues, the medical oncology community. And randomised controlled trials are really the only way to convince both our oncologists and funders that our treatments work. And my moment of truth actually came in my neuroendocrine work. And I had this publication on outcomes of patients who had with FDG-avid aggressive neuroendocrine tumours treated with lutetium dotatate. We thought the data was incredible, but I submitted it to 4 oncology journals, and they did not even send it to peer review. This is from JCO. They wrote, "Thank you, Dr. Hofman. I read your manuscript in detail. I'm sorry to report that it's unacceptable for publication. Whilst these results are suggestive of an effect of radionuclide therapy on NET patients, the retrospective nature and the smallish numbers limit the confidence we would have in your conclusions. And the report does lend credibility for a randomised study to verify the results, but as a retrospective series, it has a low priority for the Journal of Clinical Oncology." And, 3 other oncology journals, well, they didn't give me any feedback. They just rejected it quickly. And it took a long time to get lutetium dotatate accepted. Eric Krenning, who did this publication, is at SNMMI. I bumped into him in the corridors just yesterday, and I asked him when the first treatment was, and he told me it was 1992, but in this picture it's 1994. But it's taken more than 20 years to get FDA approval for this, and that only happened because of the NETA-1 trial on the left, which was published in 2017, decades later. And only a few days ago, NETA-2 published in The Lancet. And this is because our medical oncology community, our funders, governments, our health technology assessment committees, they demand high-quality evidence in the form of Kaplan-Meier curves and waterfall plots, not images or case reports or descriptions of patients with their incredible results. And, around that rejection time was kind of my moment of truth, where I realised if we want to get these treatments widely available and accepted, we need to do things more like our medical oncology colleagues do. So this is the Peter Mac Theranostics program. You can see Rod did start with some high-dose indium octreotide therapy very, very early on, way back in 1996. And in red is the lutetium dotatate program, which grew enormously. And then in blue is lutetium PSMA, which was from 2015 onwards. And that's when really a change happened, because all our lutetium PSMA was done prospectively. If you didn't enrol on the clinical trial, you couldn't get the treatment. And this was very different than the neuroendocrine program, which was all compassionate access. And it enabled us to really generate some high-quality data. So how did I discover PSMA? Well, it was actually at the EANM conference in 2011 in Birmingham. There was this picture of I-124 PSMA small molecule presented from our colleagues in Heidelberg, a collaboration with Well Cornell. And I noted that the initial experience with lots of isotopes, there was preclinical and some really early case reports with gallium, technetium, fluorine, I-124. It had incredible tumour to background contrast, a bit like radioactive iodine. And I noted in my summary of the meeting that this was a game-changing radiotracer. At that time, we were invested in building a large choline program at Peter Mac using fluorocholine for imaging. And it was a big challenge because, that was a huge investment. We had a randomised trial of fluorocholine actually running. And then this publication from Germany came showing that the SUVs for PSMA were like 5 to 10-fold higher than choline. It was vastly superior. So this quote from Charles Darwin, "It's not the strongest of the species that survived, nor the most intelligent, but the one that's most responsive to change." And we actually made a decision really overnight to dump choline and just switch to PSMA. So a year after that first publication from Heidelberg, where we saw beautiful uptake in this sub-centimetre sacral node in the pelvis, we did our first PSMA PET-CT at Peter Mac. And it was really obvious from patient number 1 that indeed this is a game-changing tracer. Now, this was a patient, I think he was 79, and he had a high-grade prostate cancer. He was scheduled to have a radical prostatectomy, which at the age of 79 is a pretty big procedure to have. And he had no metastases on CT, bone scan or MRI. But the PSMA PET showed convincingly 2 metastases, and his management was changed. He actually enrolled in a clinical trial of enzalutamide. But I also knew that an image like this would not lead to PSMA PET-CT being adopted very widely. It would remain in academic centres like Peter Mac unless we could prove categorically that it was better than conventional imaging. So we embarked on an exercise quite early on to do a prospective randomised trial, the ProPSMA trial, an investigator-run 10-site trial where we randomised 300 men to PSMA PET-CT or bone scans CT. And you can see the results, as expected, super in favour of PSMA, but it allowed us to quantify it. We could say 92% accuracy compared to 65%. And that's what our health technology assessment committees want. If you show them an amazing PSMA PET, they'll say, well, how much better is it than a CT and bone scan? And you can't actually give a number. You just say, look, it's way, way better. But they want numbers. And here we could prove this. And pleased to get this published in The Lancet. It's got a lot of citations. It's even in the top 10% of citations for The Lancet, which is a big medical journal. So we can do pretty incredible research in nuclear medicine. And a lot of younger people ask me, well, how did ProPSMA happen? I think we had a group called ARTNet, the Australian Radiopharmaceutical Trials Network, just being formed, and I was on the inaugural scientific committee for it. And Ros Francis is in the audience, who chairs the committee. And I think Andrew Scott kind of gave us a bit of a challenge. Why don't you apply for this $1.5 million grant? I don't think either of us had ever kind of done that before. And we did. It was an oncology grant. It was anything to do with prostate cancer. And I can tell you the grant funders, they love nuclear medicine. They are looking for things that are different. And we're very competitive, particularly at the moment. So we were shortlisted. And we really learnt all the process as we went along. But it was a 5-year process from grant submission through to publication in The Lancet. And it was a really rewarding thing to do. I learnt a lot about clinical trials by doing this from our urology colleagues, radiation oncology, medical oncology colleagues, our clinical trial staffs, biostatisticians. And collaborative studies like this are much like a team sport. You need good investigators, you need a coordination centre, you do need some money from a grant, and you need some organisations like a cooperative trials group or an industry-sponsored trial to do this. You do need a principal investigator like the sport team captain to put this all together. And it is a lot of work, but it's very rewarding. And one of the most rewarding things from this trial is not the Lancet publication, but this group of clinicians and clinical trial staff that came together around Australia to put this trial together from many, many disciplines. And I can tell you, if you write a protocol and have some funding, other people are very happy to go along. And because this had, funding and we could pay the sites to do a PSMA PET scan, it enabled free PSMA PET scans at all these sites around Australia. That was not only good for patients, good for the study, but good for the nuclear medicine sites. For many of these sites, this was the first time they had ever done a gallium PSMA PET scan. And I wrote a little editorial afterwards where I wrote, establishing collaborative networks working together, upskilling the next generation of specialists in clinical trial methodology are key to achieving this goal. And as new radiotracers emerge, there is a pressing need to develop and enrol patients in well-designed clinical trials, and this is the best way to properly evaluate and evaluate the impact of our tests and ensure widespread availability. So I think FAPI's been around for 10 years now. I don't see a pro-PSMA for FAPI yet, and it hasn't been widely adopted. And without doing some well-designed, proper big trials, this will remain in academic nuclear medicine centres, and it just won't evolve. So very early on, when you see a game-changing tracer, think about, how can we design a trial to prove that it works. So that's PSMA imaging, and with our big neuroendocrine program at Peter Mac, simultaneously, it was very easy for us to do lutetium PSMA therapy. We had the gallium generator, we had our radiopharmacists that could do the radiolabeling, and there was incredible data coming out of Germany. This is published in 2014, but we became aware of this data really probably in 2011, and we were already thinking about designing a clinical trial around this time. We had incredible results coming out of Richard Baum's group in Germany using PSMA INT, presented at the Theranostics World Congress in Baltimore, and an image of the air coming out of Heidelberg again, a case report of a complete response on imaging to PSMA 617. At that time, I had a colleague who was actually a radiation oncologist, John Violet, who had done a PhD in Theranostics in London. He felt more at home in the nuclear medicine department, and we used to travel to all the nuclear medicine conferences together, and he was at that EA&M meeting with me where we sort of went, let's do a therapy trial of PSMA, but let's not do it compassionate access. Let's do it properly, prospectively. And as we wrote the protocol together, the first challenge, he was a bit of a photographer like me. This is a photo he took. The first challenge we had was funding, and we had no funding. We could do it compassionate access in a similar model to our neuroendocrine program, but that certainly wouldn't fund a clinical trial. And at other meetings, another piece to our success in Australia is the ANSTO generator, where our lutetium-177 is made. This is the therapy team at the core of the nuclear reactor. And ANSTO agreed to supply us with 120 doses of lutetium for a 30-patient study. And we went on to do the first prospective series, which was really replicating the work that had been done in Germany, but done in a medical oncology mindset with an inclusion-exclusion criteria, a very rigid protocol that we followed. And this was accepted as the SNMMI Image of the Year in 2018. And we can see just how wonderful these PSMA PET scan images are. As many of you will know who have heard parts of this talk before, this image was actually rejected by Lancet Oncology. They told me to remove the image. It's biased. You've shown us the 8 best responders, but you haven't shown us the 8 worst responders, and it may mislead readers that this therapy is better than it actually is. So oncologists, they don't like anecdotes or case reports. They want data in the form of Kaplan-Meier curves. So we knew that even this image of the year and this 30 or 50 patient study would not be enough to get this treatment widely available. And back then, there wasn't really any commercial interest in PSMA, let me tell you. If we went to a company and said, we want to do a randomised trial of PSMA 617, there was almost zero interest. So we applied for competitive grants to do this, and we were lucky to receive a large grant from Movember and the Prostate Cancer Foundation of Australia, and together with generous supply of lutetium from ANSTO, we were able to do this study. And that video you saw was put together by the Prostate Cancer Foundation of Australia actually for the therapy study. And when they commissioned that video and showed it at an oncology meeting just before the study started, it was kind of the launch of the therapy study, it actually caused a bit of controversy because the oncologists in the audience, and they were the majority of the audience, they didn't like it. And they didn't like it because they were like, if you show patients this video, they won't accept the carbazitaxel arm. Everyone will want the lutetium arm. So it caused a little bit of controversy. But we did go on to run the therapy trial successfully. This was off the back of the ProPSMA study. We had that network of sites established. and the results were compelling in favour of lutetium over chemotherapy, double the response rates. By 12 months, almost everyone who had chemotherapy had progressed, compared to 20% with lutetium who had not progressed. More recently, only a few months ago, we published the longer follow-up, and I would say much to our surprise with longer follow-up, there was no difference in overall survival. When we designed this trial, when it was conceived probably in 2015, honestly, I thought lutetium will blow carbazitaxel out of the water. I thought we'd have massive separation in the survival curves, and we don't. And this is why the health technology assessment committees want randomised trials, because everyone tends to overestimate the benefits of their treatments. Surgeons, oncologists, nuclear medicine people, it's a bit of a feature of doctors in general. We tend to overestimate the value of our treatments, so we need to go and prove it. Now, this is not to say that lutetium is not better than carbazitaxel, because it is. Despite the lack of improvement in overall survival, there's huge quality of life improvement with lutetium PSMA 617, and this is extremely important. And part of that difference in OS is also because of crossover, and it's because this doesn't replace carbazitaxel, but it's an additional treatment option. So patients are receiving lutetium as a new treatment in addition to the existing standard of care. So it's really just the beginning, or at least the therapy and the pro-PSMA studies were, because once you have 2 publications in the Lancet, it actually becomes very easy to get large grants. You kind of go to the top of the academic grant ranking system quite quickly, and it enabled us to establish this Theranostics and Imaging Centre of Excellence at Peter Mac with 3 main goals. 1, to do even more clinical trials, 2, to do some discovery research, and 3, to do some education and leadership. Now, this is a photo from the launch of our Centre of Excellence a few years ago. Can anyone see the most important person in the photo? It's the young people. It's our young investigators. So these are the stars of our team, and we have a lot of them, fortunately. There's a few of them in the audience, and they're from various disciplines, not just doctors, but we have nurses doing masters. We even have a medical student who did an oral presentation today. We have urologists, radiochemists, medical physicists, even some computer science people doing deep learning algorithms. We can't forget our technologists. Brittany's in the audience. She won an award at our ANZ SNM meeting for some terbium work, which is being presented tomorrow or the day after as an oral presentation here on Tuesday. So do come to that. And really what we're trying to do in this Centre of Excellence is improve what we're already doing. And we think we can do this by better predicting response, working out who to treat, and working out mechanisms of resistance. The focus of our program has been on optimising imaging, and you'll know I'm a big fan of FDG PET. And for those of you just doing PSMA PET CT, please consider adding in FDG. It's really very useful. We see patients who are simply not going to respond to this treatment because they have disease like this. That's PSMA negative, FDG positive, but invisible on the CT scan. You just cannot see it unless you do the FDG. And this patient would benefit from other treatments other than lutetium. And we do need to find the best treatment for our patients, and it's not always theranostics. We've done a lot of dosimetry work. This was all started by Jean Mathieu, who came to our centre actually to do PET CT fellowship, but he fell in love with theranostics, and he was a hardcore researcher. So he would fill phantoms with lutetium, put them in the SPECT camera, and he would fill them with varying amounts of lutetium, and then design an algorithm to convert counts per second to megabecquerels per mil. This was in the days where none of the commercial vendors had quantitative SPECT CT. And in order to do this, since we were a busy clinical department, he would do a night shift. The day before the lutetium therapy, he would fill the phantom that was going to the lutetium from the patients into the phantom, siphon off a little bit, and he would do SPECT CT scans all night by himself in order to generate the algorithm. So quite extraordinary. And we were able to develop some really good voxel level dosimetry algorithms. And what we know from this is that none of our treatments are magical. Theranostics is essentially a radiation delivery device. This is for lutetium PSMA. The radiation dose to normal tissues is really quite low and very predictable. It's in a narrow range, but the dose to tumour is really extremely variable. And this is a feature of theranostics. We can't control the expression in the target. We'll see this with radioactive iodine. Some people are resistant. They have low expression of the sodium iodine symporter. And we were able to show a dose-response relationship. So it's pretty clear that when you do dosimetry, these two patients should not receive the same dose of radioactivity. So we do have room to improve. And with AI algorithms, this is work by our medical physicist, we're able to do these things very quickly. You don't need to do post-therapy dosimetry, even off PET scans. You get incredible quantitative biomarkers. And in the therapy study, we centrally collected all the imaging and we're able to contour everything and really show that indeed the average intensity of uptake in tumour matters. And as your expression increases, so does your response rate. So if you're in the upper quartile of PSMA expression, 90% responding, bottom quartile, 30%. This is a huge difference. And this means we can personalise treatment for our patients better if we understand this. We're also able to show that FDG was actually the strongest prognostic biomarker. This is in the Lancet Oncology 2024 publication. We compared it to conventional biomarkers, ECOG status, whether or not you have liver metastases, ALP. And actually FDG is the strongest in multivariate analysis. So we think this can be used to really maybe better personalised treatment for our patients as well. This program has led to a lot of investigator-initiated clinical trials all around Australia. In fact, there's more than 10 underway at the moment, many by other people, Louise Emmett, many others in the audience. So I'm very proud of this investigator-initiated trial network that's really evolved. The focus is on earlier treatment combinations, but also new peptides, new isotopes. I don't have time to highlight all of them. I want to highlight this one, upfront PSMA. This is the first randomised trial of lutetium PSMA 617 in patients with newly diagnosed high-volume prostate cancer, randomised between chemotherapy or lutetium followed by chemotherapy. We've got some early signals that are really promising from the PET-CT imaging, but this is a hardcore trial. We've randomised 150 people around Australia. The follow-up is at 12 months, and we're going to get the readout very shortly, and we hope it may make another practice-changing paper. Now, this is also another trial I'm proud of, the lutectomy study, where we gave lutetium PSMA 617 prior to prostatectomy in a small group of patients, really as a feasibility exercise. This is Declan Murphy, head of our uro-oncology program, proudly holding a lutectomy specimen. This is a dosimetry image from this trial, and it's quite extraordinary. You can see this prostate tumour received over 100 gray from a single dose of lutetium, and you can appreciate the ideal characteristics with almost no background activity. This is actually a partial volume corrected image where we use the MRI measurement of the prostate cancer. And with these sorts of doses, it may be possible to cure patients. We know that external beam radiation can cure prostate cancer patients, and it really is our hope that if you select patients extremely carefully, this is not going to be everyone, it's going to be a very small group, that potentially this is a curative option. Because this was only a 20-patient study, we were able to get all the patients together a few months ago for drinks and cocktails, which was really a wonderful thing to do. And we all got to chat, all the patients got to chat to each other, and Renu Epen, who's doing a PhD, who's a urologist, gave a layman's summary of the outcomes of this research to the patients. It was quite wonderful. So we have lots of trials underway. Hossein, you mentioned Primary 2, a 660-patient imaging trial. We've got Violet, Alphabet, LUCAB. James Buteau presented some of these today. I'm not going to bore you with all of them today. They're all underway. So hopefully we're going to have lots of results to share with you over the next few years. But I just want to talk about one of them, which is the Violet trial, It's called the Violet trial because it's named after John Violet, who was our radiation oncologist, who was more of a theranostician, and he unfortunately passed away 3 years ago. So we decided to name the trial after him. He had an interest in Auger electrons. He used to attend Auger emission conferences around the world, and he had a little lab in Peter Mac as well where he would play with Auger emitters, so we thought this was fitting. He is our first in human, very first study, patient number 1 on the Violet study. We had to redevelop our quantitative spec CT because none of the algorithms could do this, and we were pleased to see really good uptake and retention. And the first patient on the study pleasingly had a very good response with undetectable PSA. Now, we do have the whole periodic table to play with, and a common question I get asked is, what's going to be the next killer theranostics? And I honestly don't know. PSMA came from nowhere, and they're really hard to pick. But I was pleased to be involved with this study, just published on the front cover of J&M last month, which is a small molecule radiolabeled CA9, which has some properties that I like, which is super high SUV and low background. We imaged only 3 patients, and each patient had an SUV over 100 in tumour, up to 212. The mean intensity was 65, and we're going to treat the first patient with lutetium in a few weeks' time. And we're already thinking about how we can translate this tracer to the clinic, and we know this is going to involve a large trial. So we're already behind the scenes working on a proposal for a Australia-wide collaborative trial of this new PET agent. I'm lucky to work in a state-of-the-art building, a cancer facility that's tightly integrated with basic sciences, and we do have an extraordinary radiopharmaceutical sciences team that's really been boosted in the last few years. When I joined Peter Mac, I think we had 2 people in the radiopharmacy chemistry team, and now we have a whole team. There's actually more than a dozen people, and we were fortunate to receive a $10 million grant from the US Prostate Cancer Foundation last year to really grow this program even bigger, together with colleagues from UCLA and UCSF. Tom Hope's here. He's one of the partners on this project, and we're hoping to use 2 new technologies, a technology for peptide discovery called RAPID, and some alpha therapy with lead-212. So with this technology, we have this mRNA display where you can put, about 1 trillion unique cyclic peptides into a test tube and very rapidly identify the ones that have the highest affinity for a target, like a receptor. And we've been working hard, and we already have 3 lead ligands. This is for a novel target called ROR1 that we're hoping to move into the clinic quickly. So we now have a team and a new wet chemistry laboratory and a peptide synthesizer that's actually working every night, overnight, making variations of these peptides. And it's a real art form, because just discovering a peptide with high affinity is not good enough, because it may bind to the target very strongly, but it might have super high liver activity, which is not going to be good for theranostics. So part of the art here is not just finding the ideal tracer with high affinity, but modifying it so that it's got ideal properties for theranostics. This is the current Peter Mac team of nuclear medicine specialists, doctors, physicians, that continues to grow. We now have, I think there's 18 in this picture, including 2 PhD students, which is wonderful. And we do have a lot of fun together. A lot of this success is done through team building and working together. And importantly, we need people from different domains working really seamlessly together. And in too many places, your radiopharmacists are working in isolation to your nuclear medicine doctors, or your medical oncologists don't talk to the nuclear medicine doctors. And we all need to really come together if we want to do game-changing research. So if we come back to this chart that Barbara, you did show us, this is Saul Hertz's chart. It's titled, it's March 1946, and he wrote analysis of the first 20 cases cured by radioactive iodine. And it makes me wonder, Barbara, whether he wrote that with this pen. So that's, if that's true, that's That's quite something. And I think this slide's from you, Barbara, a little bit. I think I've transliterated this a bit, but I think, this is what you identified as what Saul Hertz thought were the ideal characteristics needed to do practice-changing theranostics. I think number one is compassionate care, to put the patients at the forefront of everything we do. We need outstanding research, phenomenal leadership, and also exceptional teaching. So that's the end of my talk. A thank you slide. There's a huge group of people back at Peter Mac that really contribute to this body of work from so many different departments, many funding partners now that make this possible. If people do want to come to Australia, come to the AANMS teaching course on the Gold Coast. Good weather in August. And if you want to see some of our talks, we have this YouTube channel and you can scan this QR code and see lots of talks from various people on the team. Thank you so much.